Okay, so let's look at Kansas and Nebraska here, which I just realized are not labeled on this map. They're in unorganized territory, but they will soon be Kansas and Nebraska. Now, the states are labeled there, but on our map, they're not. So, this Kansas territory is a growing problem because we know that the Wilmot Proviso didn't actually pass, but Southerners are upset about that. And they're okay with the Compromise of 1850, but the Northerners are upset about what has happened with the Compromise of 1850 because it moved enslavement over that 48th line. So the Southerners have decided that popular sovereignty should apply to all territories, not just Utah and Mexico. Let's make any state who wants to join the Union decide if they want to join as a free and enslaved state. This is going to become an issue. And meanwhile, we have issues within the abolitionist parties of the, I don't want to call them government because, again, they're not like super popular, but they are popular enough. So the Liberty Party, which is one of our abolition parties, wants to work with the United States government to figure this out, whereas the Free Soil Party wants white laborers to work in the new territories, and they don't want to work with the government. We don't want enslavement at all. So this is going to encourage people to assert their rights on both sides, and the Kansas-Nebraska territory will become the battleground for abolition versus enslavement. So the Democratic Party is trying to weave itself back together after all that issue with Buchanan and Cass. So from 53 to 54, they're in a rebuilding year. They need to bring them back together. And another Illinois senator from at the time, Mr. Stephen Douglas, decides he's going to solve this problem. Just like our old friend Henry Clay, Stephen Douglas is going to solve the problem. He is going to not only reunify the party, but he's also going to satisfy what the Southerners want. He's going to introduce a bill that will create two territories, Kansas, which is west of Missouri, and Nebraska, which is west of Iowa. And each of these territories will come into the Union under popular sovereignty, and they will decide for themselves whether or not they want to adopt slavery. And with this, the Missouri Compromise 3630 line, which I said 48 earlier, I don't know what I was thinking. The 3630 line from the Missouri Compromise will be completely wiped out. So our Kansas and Nebraska territories will be allowed to decide for themselves. If you don't know what happens in Kansas and Nebraska, consider those borders there, right? Missouri and Iowa. Missouri was a slave state. Iowa was not. Okay? So Douglas presents this bill, and he's hoping that this will increase his political standing and add an eastern stop for the Transcontinental Railroad. Businessman. So the bill is passed in Congress. It is a very close vote. It only wins by 3 votes in the House, and the Democrats do not come back together after this. Instead, this divides the Democratic Party. They divide among sectional lines, and the Whig Party completely dissolves. So with this bill, we get a new Republican Party, which is a group of former Whigs, Democrats who are against the act, and members of the Free Soil Party, as well as other abolitionists. And so now we have a whole new party, and this is where we get our Democrat and Republican parties officially. Although at this time, their views are Republicans are super liberal, but liberal, and Democrats are conservative in terms of federal government versus state rights. So the Republican Party decides that they are going to take a pledge to prevent the spread of slavery, which infuriates the South, and the Republican Party becomes a pretty solid Northern organization. And with that, we are going to allow Kansas and Nebraska into the Union. And so we need to make sure that things go the way we want. So from 1855 to 1856, we see tons of people just flowing into Kansas with the intention of skewing the popular sovereignty rule. And you can't really monitor that because there's not a lot of way to keep track of people who are voting and where they're voting. So we have different groups who are crossing into these states to influence the vote. And we have a group called Border Ruffians. They are pro-slavery Missourians who cross the border to vote in Kansas, which makes sense, and gain the advantage by winning territorial elections, mostly due to fraudulent voter practices and illegal vote counting. It is actually estimated that up to 60% of the Kansas votes at the time were fraudulent. But hey, what can you do? So once this pro-slavery legislature is in place in Kansas, they meet in Lecompton, Kansas, and draft a pro-slavery constitution, which is called the Lecompton Constitution. This is supported by the president at the time, who was President Buchanan, but is opposed by Stephen Douglas himself. The majority of most people in Kansas are free soilers. So they're under this pro-slavery legislature, but most of them are actually free soilers who had come from New England, who were had gone to ensure this numerical advantage against the Border Ruffians, and they're infuriated that they've co-opted the democratic process. And there is a fight between the free soilers and the Border Ruffians in 1856 in Lawrence, Kansas. The town was originally founded by the New England Immigrants Aid Society, which had funded anti-slavery settlements in the territory, and they were determined to make Kansas a free soil state, while the Border Ruffians are determined that no abolition tyrants, no Negro thieves could control this territory. So they are fighting each other. And in the spring of 1856, several leading anti-slavery citizens are arrested and indicted for treason. Several. The Border Ruffians are not. Do what you will with that. The federal marshal at the time, Israel Donaldson, puts out a call for a posse. He's going to create a posse, and they're going to go out and arrest all of these free soilers who are treason, and they're under arrest. And so we need to go find them. And so he puts out a call for a posse, and he gets all sorts of volunteers from Missouri because he can. And one of these volunteers is Sheriff Samuel Jones of Douglas County, Missouri. What a guy. Way to leave your state and go police another state. That's like real hardcore policing. Good for you. The Anti-Slavery Committee takes a policy of non-resistance. So most are indicted, just flee. But the ones who stay, Donaldson arrests 2 of them, and there's no incident there. Jones, however, Mr. Sheriff Jones there, decides that that's not how he does things. And so he does not leave Kansas, and he does not let this go. And he claims later on that he had a court order to take control of this so-called posse that was thrown together. And he takes over and he rides the posse into town armed with rifles and revolvers and swords and knives. And he flies 2 flags at the beginning of this posse, an American flag and a flag with a crouching tiger, with some banners that proclaim Southern rights and the superiority of the white race. And then at the rear of this posse, he's bringing in 5 pieces of artillery. You know, why not? So this posse, taken over by Sheriff Jones, smashes through the town. They smash the newspaper presses that are in the town. They burn down the Free State Hotel, and overall just terrify the residents of Lawrence, most of whom are not the men indicted for treason. And this makes some people very angry, especially a younger, at the time, man named John Brown and his sons, who are on their way to Lawrence when they learn of the attack. And we visit John Brown later on, but he believes that God has raised him up on purpose to break the jaws of the wicked. And so John Brown and his sons take it upon themselves to fight back. And so John Brown is a little disappointed that the citizens of Lawrence did not resist, and so Brown himself decides that he's going to go to the homes of some pro-slavery settlers near Pottawatomie Creek in Kansas, and we're going to get even for this situation. So on May 24th, 1856, John Brown and his sons burst into the homes. They call themselves the, Avenging Committee, and they kill a few people, as you do.